Malaysians, right, other than speaking Bahasa, they also speak Chinese and English. This combination of three languages, which is widely spoken across the world, definitely give a Malaysian advantage, right? Because it gives them the exposure, plus the ability to understand what's happening outside, and then translate that to certain advantages to Southeast Asia. If you look at the cost of living there, the people there are as hungry as the Singaporeans, but yet the cost is not as expensive. They work hard. So I think that in itself plays to the advantage of Malaysia.
Hi, I'm Elise Tan, and I'm your host for this episode of Heart Through 5 Vertex Podcast. Today, I have my colleague and Executive Director of Vertex Ventures SEA India, Chan Yip Pang, with us. Hi, Chan Yip.
Hey, hi, Elise. Thanks for having me.
So today we are talking about the Malaysian startup ecosystem. It's really interesting because, as you know, Malaysia is one of the country with highest GDP in Southeast Asia. So Malaysia has been growing in terms of the ecosystem in the past decades. And today, Chan Yip is going to share more about the evolution as well as the different aspects of the ecosystem. So Chan Yip, do you want to let us know a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Elise. So I actually grew up in Malaysia, specifically Malacca, the historical small town that a lot of tourists go to. So, since very young, I was actually exposed to technology. So my dad was an electrician. While he didn't have a lot of education, because he studied only until primary 6, but he understood the implication of computers, right? So since young, I was exposed to tech, and then I remember we had our first computer, which was the 486. So it was one of the coolest gadget back then. And then subsequently, I came to Singapore to study. So I went to National University of Singapore, and it was a transformative experience for me because back then I was actually selected for this program called NUS Overseas College, or in short called NOC. And that actually placed me to work in startups in Shanghai. And that was when I got exposed to startup ecosystem, plus also the VC ecosystem. So since then, that has actually guided my career decision moving forward.
Wow, a computer in that time, I think we are born around the same kind of era. So a computer is really rare during our time, believe it or not. So you must have been, it must be a great experience being exposed to it. My first experience with computer is actually just to play a computer game on or solitaire or something like that. So I'm nowhere, I guess, as technically introduced as you. So what did you do? How did you end up in Singapore?
Yeah, so you're right. I think computer was quite rare at the time. So it actually caused a bomb, right? And my brother, sister actually went on to become computer scientists, except for me. But anyway, so I, after joining NUS, and then after that, and when I graduated, I actually went on to join Singapore's Economic Development Board, which is the main government agency responsible for attracting foreign direct investments into Singapore. So I decided to take on that role because it provided me with opportunity to work with tech companies, plus also be in the investment scene, right? Because EDB is about attracting investments into Singapore. But when it comes to 2013 and 2014, then I started realizing that the startup scene in Singapore, as well as across Southeast Asia, is actually growing pretty quickly. So back then there were companies like Shopee or Grab or Tokopedia. They were all started around the same period. So therefore, in 2013, I decided to join EDBI, which is the investment arm of EDB. So that's how I kickstarted my career in investments.
Wow, I mean, it's quite an experience, going through the NOC program, being exposed to the startups in the early days, especially, in the hearts of the financial district in China, Shanghai. And then after that, you join EDB, which I think really exposed you to various industries. And then in investment, which then help you to really, get started in this space. So I'm just curious, how did you get to know Vertex?
Being an aspiring VC, everyone will have definitely heard of Vertex because Vertex is probably one of the biggest VC brand name, especially back around 2010, right, whereby there weren't that many VCs around. So Vertex was the top tier VC, and that reputation was actually cemented by the fact that they invested into Grab, which was one of the biggest tech companies around this region. So, and I was lucky enough because I actually worked with a couple of current Vertex colleague that actually used to work in EDBI. And when this opportunity came up, so someone within Vertex actually thought, why not, I give it a try. So he actually helped to submit my resume, and subsequently I was interviewed and managed to secure the job. So I was pretty lucky in that sense.
Yeah, great to have you as part of our team. So before joining Vertex, you were with Experian. So I think that really gives you an exposure to how CVC works, which can be quite different compared to VC. And one of the questions I'm often asked by entrepreneurs is, what are the differences, right, between a corporate VC and a financial VC? Maybe you can share a bit with us?
Yeah. So just a bit of background. So I was from Experian. I was actually leading the venture team for Asia Pacific. And I was also double hatting as the M&A personnel, right, within the company. So I think for any corporate VC, the key difference compared to a financial VC is that corporate VC will always look into an investment from a strategic point of view. So that means if Experian were to invest in a company, would that startup that we are investing in can potentially bring value back to the corporate, right? So that will always be the lens that they are looking at. So as a result, in terms of the type of companies that we could look at, maybe it's a bit more narrow. But that said, there's also certain opportunities that we can go after, right? So if we can do a deal whereby 1 + 1 = 3, so that's where I think those will be the deals that actually make sense for us to actually invest. So I think that will be the key difference between a corporate and a financial VC like Vertex.
Yeah, and in terms of stage, would you recommend someone who is in an early stage, for example, fundraising Series A, to be reaching out to a CVC, or would CVC be a better option for later stages?
Yeah, CVC is probably a better option for later stages because when you are very early on, you don't want to be distracted by corporates. So because sometimes when corporates, they invest in you, there is a certain direction they want to drive you to. So I would say if you want to explore CVC, maybe like Series C or Series D will make a bit more sense because that is the point whereby your company would be quite established. Your products are already there, so you don't need to do a lot of customization in order to fit what the CVC requires. And then it is the point that you scale, right? So what you want to do is actually to leverage the corporate's distribution network, and then with your differentiated product, you combine these two together, you can potentially become quite a strong force in the market. So I would say those two will be the considerations.
And I'm just going back, kind of relating it to the Malaysian ecosystem. How do you think would be the split between the CVC and the VC?
Oh. So interestingly, actually Malaysia, there's more CVC coming on board. So right, for example, there is Maxis, there is Sunway, but I would say by and large, the market is still driven by private VC. And this private VC, a number of them are actually funded by the government. So in which I think is actually healthier. So given that the Malaysian ecosystem is still trying to build up from a trough, right, that they were going through from 2018 to 2022. So right now, I think things are picking up again. So with that, I would think that the future is bright moving forward.
Going back to Malaysia, you have grown up there, and I think with the investment exposure, you have seen how the ecosystem grow. So could you maybe walk us through what has happened over the years? What were exciting moments?
Yeah, I would say that I can probably divide the Malaysia tech development into 3 different phases, right? So first is 2012 to 2017, and then 2018 to 2023, and then right now 2023 onwards. So for the very first phase, 2012 to 2017, it was actually a very exciting era. I would say it's probably the golden era for Malaysian tech, because that was when companies like Grab or Custom being set up. They started in Malaysia first. Then you also have companies like Aerodyne that have done really well as well. And during that period, it was the Najib administration. So he was a very supportive prime minister of the tech ecosystem. In fact, he actually started this agency called Magic. And Magic for a while was actually the premier investment hub, right, for Malaysia, because they managed to build a strong community. But in 2018 to 2022, I would say Malaysia actually went through a period of transition. That was because, firstly, there were a couple of government changes, and plus the fact that COVID happened during that period. So this period, we didn't really see that many quality companies actually coming out of Malaysia. But in 2023, I think we are starting to see some things picking up. So especially with this new government taking charge, I think that helps with building the ecosystem, because right now, for example, the Ministry of Economy used to run the startup himself, so he's actually know what it takes to actually run a company and to grow a company. So we are seeing more efforts by the government.
Wow, yeah, it's definitely exciting times to come. And if we zoom out a bit, this whole series that we are doing, we call it Unlocking the Trillion Opportunity in Southeast Asia Market. And when we talk about Southeast Asia Market, obviously we need to talk about Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, because some of them are big markets in Southeast Asia. And then the other thing that not to also overlook is the growing GDP per capita. So in terms of like GDP per capita and population, Malaysia has 32 million people, which is actually like 5 times Singapore size, and GDP per capita is one of the highest as well. So in context, Malaysia is one of the important markets that we look at when we do startup investments. So maybe we can also just go to talk about our portfolio. What are the startups that we have invested in Malaysia?
Yeah, sounds good. So far, we actually have 3 Malaysian portfolio. So the most notable one would be definitely Grab, whereby we were the first institutional investor into Grab. And when we invested, it was still a KL-based company. Subsequently, we have invested into StoreHub, as well as RPG Commerce. But then more importantly, we have also invested into Malaysian founder companies. So Sunday, as well as PatSnap. So PatSnap is also doing very well. So right now, already achieved a unicorn status. So I think overall, from what we have seen from the Malaysian founders, they are definitely a very resilient bunch, plus also very resourceful, right? So I think those 2 traits are really something that differentiates Malaysian founders compared to some of the peers in the region.
Definitely. I think, being a Singaporean, we are very aware that Malaysians are really hardworking, and we can see how they have contributed to really the Southeast Asia growth. In our podcast, we always talk about how do we play to the strengths of the market and what kind of notable trends, as well as kind of signs of successful startups. And we love to hear that from you as well. So in terms of, what do you think would be playing to the strengths of Malaysia? What kind of sectors should entrepreneurs be looking at? What are we interested in as an investor?
So I think, as mentioned earlier, so Malaysian founders, they are definitely pretty resourceful. And then when it comes to adversity, right, they definitely know how to navigate around it. So I think that in itself is actually very strong. And plus the fact that Malaysians also is an English-speaking country, so they tend to have a bit more international exposure as well. That gives them a bit more advantage, right, in terms of understanding what's happening around the world and how they can learn, be it from the Western world or even the Chinese, because as you know, Malaysia have a pretty large Chinese population as well. So, but at the same time, there is an advantage of cost, whereby they have the advantage of Singapore, but at the same time, it's not as expensive, right? If you look at the cost of living there, the people there are as hungry as the Singaporeans, but yet the cost is not as expensive. They work hard. So I think that in itself plays to the advantage of Malaysia. In terms of trends that we are seeing, I think Malaysia is still pretty much a consumption economy. So if you look at the GDP contribution by private consumption, it actually goes up to 60%. And some of the companies that seem to be quite successful in Malaysia tend to be consumer companies, right? So starting with Grab, for example, and then of course we also have RPG Commerce, which is selling a lot of water bottles or cookwares in Malaysia. And some of the companies that have gone on to IPO, and they are also consumer companies, right? So the names I can think of would be like Mr. DIY, or T Life that's actually doing extremely well as well, even though it's not listed yet. Then we also have Farm Fresh, which got listed recently. So all these companies are actually very highly valued in Malaysia.
Great. I mean, definitely Malaysia is one of my favorite holiday destination. And you mentioned about Mr. DIY is my favorite store as well when I go shopping with my family. I think these are all exciting businesses coming from Malaysia. I just want to take a step back as well. You may already know we just launched our fifth fund of 541 million. So we again are going to invest into the early stage companies. So this means it could be as early as seed in some cases, but pre-A, Series A, and Series B. So our check size typically 2 to 8 million. In across Southeast Asia, not just Malaysia, we are in the sectors of consumer, enterprise, fintech, healthcare, sustainability, mobility. But in general, we are agnostic. Yeah, so I think what we have invested so far are primarily in the consumer and enterprise space, but we are definitely open to other areas as well. And I also want to just ask you this quick question. So I think definitely in terms of economic activity, Kuala Lumpur will have quite a bit of startup activity. Well, which other part of Malaysia is also very active?
Yeah, so interestingly, I think the Malaysian government is actually doing a pretty good job. So of course, Kuala Lumpur is the main city, right? There's a lot of startups are headquartered in. But increasingly, we are also seeing some activities in Penang. And recently, the Malaysian government, my startup entity, has gone on to like Sabah as well as Sarawak to actually extend the outreach. So hopefully, we'll be able to see like differentiated startups from those regions moving forward.
Great. So Chan Yip, thanks for sharing, quite a bit about yourself as well as the evolution of the Malaysian market and what is to come. What do you think is Vertex investment thesis for Malaysia? What do you think will work well?
Yeah, so we generally invest in 6 different verticals, right? So number 1 is consumer, second one fintech, third is enterprise software, fourth healthcare, fifth sustainability, and number 6 is mobility. So in terms of thematic focus, we're probably not going to deviate away from that. But our investment thesis is always the same, right? Whereby we want to back founders that's working on a very ambitious problem. We want to be solving problems that are difficult to solve, and the market should be big enough, right, for such a problem to exist as well. So with all this, I think that will be the key criteria when we look for investments. So we always back ambitious founders, and we want them to succeed.
Through your observations of the ecosystem, what are some of the hard truths and advice they would give entrepreneurs who are working in the Malaysia ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think the Malaysia ecosystem, interestingly, there's actually quite a bit of money because if you look at the VC funding by the government, right, actually up to 45% of the VC funds are actually supported by the government. So in terms of availability of capital, it's definitely there. But what probably can be done a bit better or can be improved is actually in terms of the top of the funnel, whereby right now, if you look at what the Malaysian government is doing, they're trying to attract the likes of Antler and Park and Play because they realize that actually top of the funnel is where the issue is. So it's actually a great time for entrepreneurs that want to start up company right now because you get more support at the early stage level. With someone like Antler that have experience of building companies across the region, I think that will be a good start. And as you build a company, so don't just think about Malaysia as a market, right? So think about Southeast Asia. I think that one is quite important. Malaysia actually have to build champions for Southeast Asia. And we have pretty good examples, right? Like for example, Grab right now is a regional company. And then increasingly for Custom also is a regional company. So definitely you have good examples to follow. So I will urge the Malaysian founders to think big and eventually leverage, right, some of the resources that the Malaysian government has put in place. I think that will really help the Malaysian companies to scale accordingly.
Great. And I just curious, do you think that being in Malaysia also give the entrepreneurs an advantage expanding to neighboring countries like Indonesia because of the language, because of perhaps, certain similarities?
Yeah, definitely. So Malaysians, right, other than speaking Bahasa, they also speak Chinese and speak English. So with this combination of three languages, which is widely spoken across the world, I think that definitely gives a Malaysian advantage, right? Because it gives them the exposure, plus the ability to understand what's happening outside, and then translate that to certain advantages to Southeast Asia, and plus. The quality of life is also pretty good in Malaysia. So I would urge the entrepreneurs to actually take advantage of these two facts and then build a company that is, in terms of unit economics, very attractive, and then work on big problems that can actually scale across the region, right? So with that, I think definitely Malaysian entrepreneurs have an advantage in terms of building a scalable company across the region.
Yeah, so we talked about the funnel earlier and how Malaysia is kind of increasing, the earlier part of the funnel. And I maybe also want to ask you about the end of the funnel, which is what are the usual exit opportunities for Malaysia?
Yeah, so in the past couple of years, there has been a number of big companies that have gone on to become listed companies, right? So take for instance, Mr. DIY or CTOS. So Malaysia as a exchange or public listed exchange actually have pretty good valuation as well. So, but the downside of that is that you have to be a profitable company before you can list in Malaysia. So, if you're a tech company that's scaling pretty quickly, perhaps can explore other regions, right? So, for instance, Australia could be one market, and we have also seen companies coming into Singapore to list. And those that are bigger ones have actually gone on to NASDAQ to actually list. So the options are definitely there. So it depends on what the scale of the company is and at what stage, whether you're profitable or you're still burning money in order to gain more market share. So I would say that as a whole, that options are definitely there. It's just up to be explored.
Yeah, and I think earlier you mentioned about how important it is to also scale into the region. And as they scale in the region, really, as the opportunities is all around, right? It's not just one to one market. Yeah. And I just want to, ask you what you learn along the way, in terms of observing the ecosystem growth. It could be in Malaysia context, or it could be because of your, kind of long investing experience. Yeah, what can you share with the audience?
Yeah, so I think right now we are definitely in a down cycle. But be it up or down, right? I would think that in general, this is a cyclical thing that we have to go through. So happen every 10 years or 15 years, there'll be one event that's happening. So I think for an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, what is most important is to really solve a big problem for their customers, right? And then once you actually do that, regardless whether it's down cycle or up cycle, which is something that you cannot control, you will still be able to build a great business. So just focus on what is within your control, build a big business out of it, and then let the rest take care of itself.
Yeah, very true. What are your thoughts about, the current, maybe when it comes to valuation and expectations?
Yeah.
How should entrepreneurs be thinking about it?
Yeah, so I think interestingly for the past couple of years, right, because of the COVID and then a lot of money printing, as a result, valuation went up very high in 2021. So that kind of like helped the entrepreneurs to have certain mindsets already currently. So I think when the market comes down, the entrepreneurs will have to adjust accordingly. And more importantly, entrepreneurs have to think about what it actually takes to actually build the business. So if you need to raise money, go out and raise money. Because if you're able to raise money in this environment, it's actually an advantage. Because you as a company, if you are able to raise $10 million, and if your competitor of your neighbor are not able to raise $10 million, that could be an advantage, right? So I would urge any entrepreneurs to think about what it takes to succeed. And if you need to raise money in this environment, even though it's a lower valuation, still go ahead and do it, because at the end of the day, it's all relative. If you are doing better than your competitors, then that's what is most important, because you are gaining market share.
Yeah, and I think gaining market share at the expense of your competitor, and when your competitor has less cash flow, perhaps that is a great strategy. I just want to share that Southeast Asia and India, as a fund, we are present in quite a few cities in Southeast Asia and India. However, for Malaysia, we are covering it from our Singapore office. So maybe you can share with us, if someone in Malaysia is building something interesting, how should they reach out to you?
Yeah, so actually I visit Malaysia pretty often, so almost once a month. So if you want to reach out to me, always can ping me on LinkedIn. Or you can actually reach out to friends in Malaysia, right? So like, for example, Endeavor or Cradle, all of them would know me. So feel free to reach out to them or just ping me directly at LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Chan Yip. It was such a pleasure speaking to you and learning about the Malaysian ecosystem from you.
Thanks, Elise, for having me. Yeah, have fun.
Thank you.